You know, it's time for some honesty here. All right? So we have these Pan-Africanists that are online, and every single time, time after time, it never fails. These Pan-Africanists are coming up with narratives saying that we should all go back to Africa. I've seen the narrative from a video I watched earlier saying that we should build a country in Africa for ourselves. Of course, they never provided any real tangible concept of operations. All right, they never provided a way of how we're actually going to achieve that. It never came across to them. So that's how all the Pan-Africanists always operate. They always have these crazy fantasy talk ideas, and they have no legitimate way of how to achieve them. Anytime you ask them for specifics, they're always like, well, you just ain't being pro-black. You just want to be like the white man. That's what they do. They start accusing you of wanting to be a slave. That's how they use shaming tactics. That's the Pan-Africanist in a nutshell. When they say something and you don't automatically just go or agree with their program, they say that you just want to be a slave. You're mentally enslaved. That's how the Pan-Africanists operate. And with this ADOS movement that picked up with Yvette Carnell and Antonio Talks, I want to give them a shout out, even though they probably don't need a shout out from me. But I want to give them a shout out and recognize them for starting this movement, because it's very important that the American descendants of slaves recognize that we are a different group and that we are owed certain benefits and certain privileges. But it doesn't just end with reparations. Okay? It doesn't just end with reparations. This whole ADOS movement is not just about reparations. And I want to make that point very clear. Okay, so the Africans, the black immigrants from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Brazil, wherever they came from, all right, Black Britons. We came out with this ADOS movement, and now they want to call us divisive. They want to say that why you want to separate when they came to this country wanting to separate themselves. Just look up the African Immigrant Caucus. Look up that. That should tell you everything you need to know. They come over here wanting to separate. They just want to be on their own. So now that they've claimed that they want to be on their own, now that they've said, well, I'm not a black. I'm not an African American. How dare you call me an African American? I'm a Nigerian. I'm not like them. Akata. That's what they think of us, right? And they've been treating us like that for a while now, and it's finally caught up to them. All right, well, if you want to separate from us, well, we don't want to be on your side either. So we're going to create a name for ourselves. We're going to create a group for ourselves, and we're going to say, hey, we need benefits for ourselves because we need to be recognized as a different group. You know, we are evolving. The United States is bringing in more immigrants than ever before, all right? And now a lot of these immigrants are African. Now, it used to be that the African immigrants would just blend in with the African American society because there wasn't a lot of them, or either that or they wouldn't talk or interact much with us, all right? But now there's a lot more of them coming in. Now they have their own groups. Now they have, they're getting into more political positions, and they're making it clear they ain't like us. You got African YouTubers going on to white YouTubers' channels and telling their white audience, right, that, well, I got to the position that I'm at because I work hard. I work very, very hard. I work extremely hard. What is that anyway? Seriously. Work extremely hard? Work very, very hard? Shoot. Over here, that sounds like some pretty intense. That sounds like some slave labor type stuff. That sounds like some really inhumane labor. Forgive the pun, though. I'm not trying to reference actual slavery, but man, that sounds like some inhumane labor. I work very, very hard. No, no. What they're saying is we got these opportunities that should have been your opportunities, and we're going to use this as an excuse to justify why we deserve these benefits. That's what that means. We work very, very hard. So anytime you hear a African immigrant, a Caribbean immigrant say that we got this because we work very hard, or Black Britain who's taking our movie roles saying, oh, we worked extremely hard. Come on. Come on, seriously. That's nothing but an excuse for them to justify them taking benefits and opportunities here in America and not giving you credit for it, not giving the ADOS credit for it, not giving credit to the civil rights movement, not giving credit to current day. When we go out and protest against police brutality or any disrespect against Black people, you don't see the Africans or the Caribbeans standing up when an actor says something racist against Black people on TV. They're quiet. It's the Black Americans, it's the ADOS. We're the ones that make that happen. The American descendants of slaves, the ADOS. I like the term. I like how I said ADOS. I like the sound of that. But for right now, it's just American descendants of slavery, ADOS. So that's the proper term. But sometimes I might refer to it as ADOS. And that's really grimy, but you gotta understand that that's where these people come from. Where they come from, they're cutthroat. It's about survival over there in those third world countries, especially in the Caribbean and Africa. And then the ADOS here, we're used to a more gentler side of humanity. And then when we come in contact with that cutthroat portion, then we just don't know. We kind of didn't know how to react to it at first, but when it slapped us in the face, we created this ADOS movement, the ADOS movement, and we start throwing our support behind it because we need to protect our benefits for our group. That's what we need to do. Now, like I said before at the beginning of this video essay, the Pan-Africanists, they want to prevent that. They do not like the American descendants of slavery. They want to live in this fantasy world that says that all Black people are the same and we're all in a fight against white supremacy. Come on now. The African immigrants, the Black immigrants, they're not fighting against white supremacy. They come over here to America, and let me tell you what they do. All right? Like I said before, they're getting on these white channels and they're dissing American descendants of slaves. They're dissing African Americans in order to make the white Americans happy. And they're happy to do that in order to get resources. And then they're getting our resources, as a matter of fact, our affirmative action. That's what they're getting. So they ain't come over here and really earn anything. When the civil rights movement was going on, they were nowhere to be seen. But as soon as they saw benefits were being handed out, they were on the first boat to America to see if they could get their hands in it. And at the heart of it, it's really our fault for allowing these people to just come in and walk all over us and believe in this we are all the same narrative, which wasn't true. Never was true. They never believed in it. We were the only ones that believed in it. Okay, so we create now we have the ADOS movement moving right now. But now we got the Pan-Africanists, who are the ones who are the most aggressively against it, who speak out against it aggressively. You're trying to divide us. We were never together. We were never unified in the first place. It was always one-sided. It was always a one-sided Black American fantasy, African American fantasy. that these African American Pan-Africanists had, that all black people were the same, and that we were going to come together and fight the white man like some fantasy novel. These people, like, coming up with these fantasy ideas, it's nothing new for these Pan-Africanists. They've been doing this for decades, and we've been listening to this dribble forever. They've never came up with any concrete plan. That's why they've never executed any concrete plan. You know, I don't want to say any names, you know, but there was a Pan-Africanist that collected money to build a school, right? Took 10 years, and I mean, looks like something's happening with it, but it doesn't take 10 years to build a school. All right, and that's what signifies. That's a great example of what Pan-Africanist is. They're just hustlers. Some of them are hustlers. They just want to get your money. There's some Pan-Africanists that have these Facebook groups where you join this Facebook group and you have to pay a fee every month. So I'm just letting you know, I'm telling you this because the Pan-Africanists are going to fight this tooth and nail. They don't care about American descendants of slaves. They don't care about you. They don't care about the people. They don't care. I can tell you for sure that the Africans and the black immigrants, the Caribbean immigrants, they don't give a damn. They don't care. But I'm just letting you know that the Pan-Africanists, they have a lot in this. They're trying to protect either their subscription and their money, their subscriber base, or they're just trying to protect the fantasy that they've been living for who knows how many years. And they're fighting aggressively because now they have to admit that they wasted years of their lives chasing an ideology that doesn't work. Plus, if you've been a Pan-Africanist for so long in your life, why haven't you transitioned to Africa yet? What's the reason for that? If all the Africans feel the same way, then why aren't you able to go to Africa and get citizenship and get treated the same way? And I'm not talking about you just being a tourist and them being nice to you. That's what I don't like to hear. I do not like hearing when black Americans say, I went to Africa and man, they were nice to me. Nah. That's just regular hospitality. That's just regular hospitality. That's just something you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be nice. That's just like the nice guy in dating saying, well, why didn't she want to be with me? I was really nice. Because nice isn't it's not something tangible. It's not something that makes you attractive, you know? That's the exact same thing. So just because they are nice to you, you're going to come back to America and you're going to tell us, the American descendants of slaves, that we need to go out and give our resources and our benefits to these Africans. And that's the dangerous part about it. Is because these Pan-Africanists, they're not going out and pushing this narrative hard on Africa. They're just going out there. They might go out to Africa and hang out and make some friends over there and then come back here. And then when they talk to us, they're real aggressive when they talk to us. They're like, you Negroes, you need to go out there and support these Africans. You need to go to Africa. Or else you a slave. You know, these Negroes always just want to be slaves up here in the white man's land. That's what they talk. That's how they talk to us. That should be a sign to you right there. How are you going to come back and talk to American descendants of slaves, your people, like that, right? And then they're not providing anything substantial. They're not providing anything tangible. Remember when I was telling you about providing citizenship in these countries? It's very difficult to get citizenship in these countries. Very difficult. We got a lot of African Americans that are in Ghana. A lot of African Americans in Ghana, and they're not getting citizenship. It's very difficult for them to get citizenship. And they did that year of return, and There, you got some African Americans that went over there, and there are, and just so you know, I know that there's been African Americans there, but some African Americans have went over there, and it's been difficult to get citizenship. And that's the same thing with all the African countries. You got to do it just like all the rest of the nationalities, the Chinese, the whites, from Europe and Australia. You got to wait in line just like them. You got to sit there for 5-10 years, supposedly, before you can get citizenship. No special treatment for American descendants of slaves. And these Pan-Africanists, they want us to go to Africa and build. They want us to build up Africa or build an African country. You know that none of these countries are going to give up land. Like, let's not even discuss that. None of these African countries are going to give us land, give land to American descendants of slaves. We haven't been in that land for centuries, and then we're just going to undercut all the tribes and then just take land. And I'm talking about getting land to build a sovereign nation. So you're not going to build a sovereign nation in Africa. Not going to happen. Could you negotiate? Maybe, yeah, you can negotiate, but they ain't going to give you nothing. They're not. And we keep, the biggest problem with the Pan-Africanists is not the Pan-Africanists themselves. The biggest problem is with the American descendants of slaves sitting here listening to these Pan-Africanists. We need to set standards, man. We need higher standards. We can't just keep sitting here allowing these Pan-Africanists to come over here and just tell us anything, any old fantasy without a concrete plan, without actual resources to back up that plan. They can just throw anything out there. Hey, we need to go to Africa and build a country. Hey, you need to come to Africa and support this plan, or else you just want to be a slave. Man, you just want to be a coon. Man, you just want to be a slave underneath the white man. And that's their tactic. That's all they have to offer. And they do this for attention, but moreover, they do this because the American descendants of slaves, we allow them to do it. We allow them to make this nonsensical, irrational plan, and we just sit there and listen to them. The moment that he said, let's build a country in Africa, the next question needs to be, all right, where in Africa, what country was it going to be in? What economic resources do you bring? And what's your strategy to convince them to give us the land? No, they're not going to give you that. They're going to just say, well, if you don't immediately agree with it, then you a coon. There's nothing more dangerous right now for the American descendants of slaves than these Pan-Africanists. They have nothing but irrational, incomplete. It's not even incomplete. These aren't even plans. These are just fantasy ideas. They're nothing but fantasy idealists. They have no concrete plans whatsoever. And what they're doing is not only are they trying to get attention, but they mostly want to live their fantasy through you. They want you to go over to Africa, and so that they can feel like they did something when they're just sitting in America. I can guarantee you that these Pan-Africanists, they're not going to give up their American citizenship and move to Africa. Every single one I've seen, a whole bunch of people who are talking about moving to Africa on the internet, they're still sitting there on the internet in America talking about, well, why don't y'all move to Africa? We need to move to Africa. Why don't you lead by example and move to Africa and tell us how great it is? They're not going to, because the African countries don't care about them. They're not Pan-Africanists. The African countries do not care about Pan-Africanism. They don't care about American descendants of slaves. They don't care about them. When they come to them, when the Pan-Africanists go to the Africans with that Pan-Africanist mumble talk, they dismiss them. They don't allow them to stay around them and talk that nonsense. The only reason why they do that to us is because we allow them to stand around us. We allow them to talk that nonsense, and we try to reason with them. There's no reason for us to reason with them. You ask them, okay, present a plan, present economic resources, how we're going to get those economic resources, and we'll consider that. All right, then we'll take you seriously. But until then, you're just a Pan-Africanist mumble talker. Pan-Africanist mumble talk. All of them do that, and the problem is that these people want to live vicariously through us. They want us to sacrifice our resources and sacrifice your lives going to Africa. Man, you could get killed in Africa. Seriously. That's a serious threat right there. And I'm not talking about just from other people there or from crime. I'm talking about malaria, you have yellow fever. There are things that you can do to minimize that. I don't want to make it sound too crazy, all right? But yeah, I mean, you go over to Africa, there's definitely some serious challenges there. It's a lot more complicated than what they make it seem. They make it sound like it's going to be this fantasy, there ain't going to be no racism, but then you got to deal with tribalism, right? Man, them Africans are over there fighting each other. In my opinion, them African countries they're not really nations. You know, these countries are these countries are just land masses assigned a name. Land masses assigned a name in a border with a bunch of tribes in them. The people don't have the same culture. They're just trying to work together. And that's why these African countries can't really succeed. They can't really excel because they're too busy fighting each other. Maybe that might change in the future, but for right now, that's where they are. We got to deal with it for where it's at. All right, we can't be living in no fantasy world. And when American descendants of slaves try to go to Africa, when they try to go to Africa and ask for land, well, you're basically saying you're trying to be one of those competing tribes. That's all that's going to happen. And those Black Americans, African Americans who try to go to Africa and try to build whatever that means, go to Africa to try to build. What exactly are you trying to build? You're going to go over there and build a house? What? You're going to go over there and build a playground? What are you going to go build? Talking about building one of the African nations. Seriously. Like, how are we going to build the African nation? What's the concrete plan? We got skilled labor over here, but how are you going to actually realistically convince those people to go to Africa and build Africa? Right? And plus, the countries are corrupt anyway. They never take any of this into account. They never talk about, the Pan-Africanists never talk about this type of stuff. They never talk about the corruption. All right? They're like, what's that going to look like? How are they going to get there? And secondly, are the people going to be receptive to a bunch of Black Americans literally invading their land? You know, like, people are going to start realizing, whoa, there's a lot of Black Americans here. Why are they coming here? You know, and people are going to get a huge wake-up call when they go there. It's going to be a huge slap in the face. When you don't get the reception, and the Africans over there aren't as Pan-Africanist as you'd like to imagine. You'd be like, I thought we were all brothers. Like, the Africans going to be like, no. What were you thinking? So this is the type of stuff that the Pan-Africanists, the people who believe in this Pan-African movement, this is what they are. This is who they are. All right? This is the ADOS Flame channel, and we just go in hot. We go in hot. All right? And they want the American descendants of slaves, they want us to be the sacrifice for their fantasy so that they or for their subscription service that they got going on Facebook or whatever else they got going on. And the last thing that we need to be aware of, right, is that ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, is not just about reparations, all right? I believe it at its heart, it's not just about reparations, about getting our due. It's about us creating a group to protect our culture. We have such a rich culture. And the Pan-Africanists will make you feel bad about your culture. They'll make you feel bad about your history. You just want to be a slave. That's what they've always been doing. But I would say, American Descendants of Slaves, we have a proud history. We've accomplished a lot. We got so many heroes. Harriet Tubman. We got Frederick Douglass. We got Morgan Garrett, who created a gas mask and a stoplight. We created a lot of inventions and we've done a lot of things, from doing the first open heart surgery. We fought in World War II. We had what they call back then a Negro unit that built a road in Alaska. They built a road all the way through Alaska. Incredible things. We even helped to design the first cell phones. Come on now. So if we go back to Africa and just give all of that up, we give up all that history, we give up all those heroes, Dr. Claude Anderson, everybody, just to be Pan-Africanist. And when you go over, trust to believe, when you go over to those African countries, you're going to be given up. You have to submit to their culture. They're going to expect you to assimilate. Whenever they actually give you citizenship, you'll just be sitting over. For the first few years, you're just going to be sitting over there and getting slapped up by their corrupt government. That's what it's going to be. ADOS, we are a culture. We are a people. We have that rich history. We share a common connection of coming out of slavery. We have ancestors who came out of slavery and they built a life for themselves here in the United States. And they've continued to do incredible things. The Harlem Renaissance. This is all us. And trust to believe, if you try to just go to Africa, you're going to give up all that history. And we're using this history to group ourselves together so that we can lobby at the United States government for benefits. You understand? So that our kids can go to school, can go to excellent schools. We can use this movement to group ourselves together to build businesses under ourselves. Come on now. There's so many. This unity will allow us to build so many things, and it's going to relate to us coming out of the slavery experience. Now, as Professor Truth always says, power is not inclusive, it is exclusive. And I believe you got that from Dr. Claude Anderson. Power is not inclusive, it is exclusive. And with the number of black immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa increasing every year, and their numbers increasing every year, and they're getting together and they're creating their own groups. The Africans creating the African Immigrant Caucus. Caribbean blacks are creating their groups. And trust to believe, they are not just coming to America to benefit off of our benefits, off of a few of our benefits, off of a few of our reparations. They're not just here for that. They're not just here to benefit off of affirmative action. They're here to take our music. They're here to take our culture. They're here to take our history. I don't have her name off the top of my head, but there's this African who's playing as Harriet Tubman in a movie. You got black British people playing as ADOS characters in the hood. As African Americans, as African American gangsters, they got these black British people playing as them. So as you can see, they're not just here to take some affirmative action benefits or to try to benefit off of reparations. They're here to take the culture. Just like Jennifer Lopez, the Latina, she tried to take Motown. She tried to own that culture. But black people stood up to that. Yeah, we had a couple of coons, but overall, black Americans stood up to that. Overall. But you can see that these other groups are going to try us. They're going to try and take what's ours. They're going to try and take our culture. They're going to try and seize our history and change it and manipulate it. And we have to be the safeguards of that. The American descendants of slaves have to safeguard our people, our group, our history, and we have to give our group a future. We have to give our future to our children, to our nieces, to our cousins, to all our family. And we got to work together in order to be able to accomplish that, because these groups, they're banding together to come for our heads. Now, if you got kids, go look at your kids. Go up to your kids. If you got your nieces, nephew, think about them real quick and say, don't you want a future for them? What kind of benefits will they get? Will they be able to go to school, afford to go to school, or will the African immigrants, Caribbean immigrants take their place? What opportunities are they going to be afforded? I want you to think about that before you dismiss American descendants of slaves. Okay. I just had to make this video because this is an important time in our history. 20, 30 years from now, the immigrant population, the black immigrant population could be double what it is today. And you know they're going to be more aggressive. They will. The last I saw was 2016 census saying that there was about 4.2 million immigrants. They've been increasing since 1980. They've been increasing it since 1980. So we got to defend. This is a new time and age, and now we can't just be black anymore. You understand? We got to defend our history, our unique history. We got to defend our people, because these people are not going to allow us or accept us into their people. They're just not. And they're going to take all of our resources, our history, misconstrue it, use it, and then throw it away. And they're going to be the new black Americans. Think about that.